Everybody, welcome to Simulmedia Live. You're watching us almost certainly from LinkedIn, from Twitter, or from Zoom. And regardless of how you're doing it, I really want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedules to join us for some really great conversation. You know, if you've been watching the show over the last several months, then you know that we've been featuring guests on the program who have had something useful to say in the moment about how to navigate in this moment, about how to make better decisions in face of major constraints and headwinds. And we've heard from the likes of Bob Leodis and Brian Weiser and Bill Harvey and so many others who've had very useful things to say about navigating through crises because they've seen it before and they know the playbook. Well, it's understandable and natural now, I think, for advertisers and folks who work closer in advertising to begin thinking and looking ahead. What decisions need to be made next? And how do we start planning for what will certainly be some uncertainty ahead, but how do we start making longer term decisions for the benefit of our customers, our employees, our shareholders? And so I was thinking about that in the context of a remarkable piece that was published in Media Post now going back about a month ago by David Cohen and Randall Rothenberg of the IAB with a headline, a very strong headline, that reads, "A changed world means the ad industry must also change how video is bought and sold." And the article then proceeds to make some very ambitious statements about ways in which the buyer experience in video advertising can be made to be just as golden as the viewer experience has become as a result of the explosion in viewing choices that we now have through the likes of Netflix and Amazon Prime Video and Hulu, and to say nothing of the cable and broadcast channels that have been serving us up great content for decades. So when we saw this, I thought, boy, really important that we get the IAB to join us to talk about this ambitious movement that they've embarked upon and they're really rallying the industry around. And so I'm so pleased today to be joined by David Cohen. He is the president of the Interactive Advertising Bureau, or the IAB. David has a long history of exemplary agency experience, including at and Magna. And so, David, welcome to Simulmedia Live. It's great to see you.
It is great to see you too. Thanks for having me.
So first things first, how are the team at IAB doing? How's your family doing through all of this?
Things are going, remarkably well. We've been commenting over the past several months at how relatively easy it has been to kind of take our business and move it virtual. So we've been very productive, doing lots of really good, smart strategic work, helping our members kind of get through what is arguably the most difficult period of the business that we've ever seen. So all good. On the family side, no complaints there. I've got two teenage daughters who are home with me and my wife, and we've been connecting now more than we have, probably more in the past 3 months than we have in the past 5 years. So that's also a good benefit.
David, I have two teenage daughters too. And one thing that I've come to appreciate, in addition to the unfettered access that we have now as a family together, is just how much my heart goes out to parents who have really young kids right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure, like you, our daughters are independent. They don't need a whole lot of management with their homework or, just sort of keeping their schedules together. And so I just want to point out to all of my friends and colleagues and anyone who's watching this who have young children, know that I feel for you and I so admire what you're doing. You're working so much harder than I am.
Yeah, totally agree. Also, the folks that have just a small Manhattan apartment is also a difficult thing to just be in a confined space as we're trying to do things like this with just distractions around you. So yeah, I think we're very lucky all in all. Have a backyard to go out to and have some room for us to spread out in.
Yeah, that is it's awfully fortunate. Let's dive into the reason really for our interview today, David. Your column in Media Post with Randall Rothenberg really spells out a list of problems with the industry and then pivots to the solution. Let's start with the problems. Walk us through what you see as the major problems affecting the industry today that the IAB wants to tackle.
How much time do you have? I'm joking, of course. The problems. Let's see, and let's put that in context. I think we as an industry, we tend to kind of bellyache a lot about the problems. I've spent most of my career trying to help solve some of those problems. And let's just also put it in perspective. You have the linear television business, which is depending on who you believe, a $70 billion business. You have the digital video business. We just released a PwC study that looked at kind of full year 2019. That's a $22 billion business. So we have $92 billion of video that's actually going through the industry. So some things are working reasonably well. So let's just set that for starters. The truth of the matter is that as time has gone on and as consumers have gone from platform to platform, screen to screen, very fluidly, without blinking an eye or missing a beat, we haven't quite kept up as part of the industry in the way that we count them, measure them, value them, connect with them. The ad experiences are quite different. So consumers have kind of merged those two worlds together. And we're still kind of operating, in many cases, the same way we've been operating for 50 plus years. And that needs to change. So the things that are, problematic we hear this all the time. We've done a lot of research as to what are the key challenges in the video ecosystem. The one that comes up all the time is measurement. We've been hearing about measurement since time immemorial. So we need to kind of think about how does measurement kind of standardize across the video ecosystem, whether it's on a mobile phone, whether it's on a desktop, laptop, OTT device, etc. And understanding unduplicated reach and frequency is also a challenge. So as you can imagine, if you look at anyone's media habits during the day, it's a difficult challenge to be able to keep track of that in a combination of panel and census-based methodologies. So those are the two things that come immediately to mind. We count differently, and we value things differently depending on what the consumption device is, and that I think is the underlying challenge.
We're speaking today with David Cohen, who is the president of the Interactive Advertising Bureau. I'll call them the IAB for expediency from this point on. That is how they're known colloquially. If you have questions for David and would like to get those into our show, we'll do our very best to get your questions on the air. Just ask however you're watching. We have eyes on every platform, and we'll get your questions to David, we hope, before the end of the half hour here. David, you mentioned in the column that you penned in Media Post that all the problems that you've described have been acknowledged for a while, and others have tried to tackle these problems before. Why do you think this time is different?
What a good question. I have scars from the times that I personally have tried to fight these issues before, whether it's the time that I spent at the 4As, whether it was on making measurement make sense, the Future of Television initiative. So you're absolutely right. We have no shortage of initiatives that we've done over the years to try to get at these challenges. They say the first step in solving a problem is acknowledging that you have a problem. And I think that from what we're hearing from our membership, as the video ecosystem becomes more omni-channel, the friction between the buy side and the sell side has just been getting worse. So there have been kind of band-aids or workarounds, which have kind of been one-offs. So an individual media partner might decide that this is going to be our solution, but we don't have at the industry level something that kind of reduces the friction between the buy side and the sell side. The analogy that comes up to me all the time when I think about this, and I've said it a couple of times, is that it's much easier to change the tires on your car when you're going 5 miles an hour than when you're going 75 miles an hour. So as the industry has slowed a bit as a result of the pandemic and the coronavirus, by all accounts, second quarter down 30-ish%. There has never been a better time to use this as a point to reset, rethink, and reevaluate some of the things that we've been talking about for a long time. We kicked off this initiative, and we've gotten some really good feedback that the time is now. There are people that have said we have nothing to lose and only lots to gain. So we're optimistic that we're actually going to make some progress this time.
That's interesting. You mentioned the impacts of the pandemic and the fact that revenues are down, and I've heard the same numbers, David, about the declines. Do you think, absent the current conditions that we're in, the pandemic and the economic havoc that it has wrought, do you think that you'd find as much traction for this movement now otherwise?
Consumers are leading the way, and they should be our North Star. They should be our guiding light. So we've been seeing kind of the migration of audiences from linear television to connected television and OTT for the past, let's say, 3 years in earnest. The pandemic has poured a bunch of gasoline on that fire and just rapidly, I've heard the expression, we were planning for the decade of OTT, which we've now realized in the last 3 months of the year, of the year. So OTT has scaled in a way that I don't know anyone could have predicted. It's been our source of entertainment, our source of news, our source of solace. So I think that consumers, regardless, and the pandemic has certainly helped accelerate that from platform to platform, screen to screen. But invariably, we would have needed to get there anyway. The future of the video business is digital. And we are seeing that kind of play itself out in real time right before our eyes. This is the year of streaming. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And we need to kind of move the industry standards and practices in line with where consumers are going. Just a quick plug, we have the New Fronts, which is not next week, the following week, the week of the 22nd, which is the de facto kind of streaming exhibition for consumers, content, and technology, and we're super excited about that as well.
Yeah, good time to make that plug, and good time, I think, to get involved in addressing some of these core issues, because you're right that from the consumer perspective, David, that streaming is on the rise, but the proportion of advertising supported streaming that advertisers can actually get their hands on to reach customers is the minority of that viewing time spent. And when you correct for, or you adjust for example, the number of households that receive both ad supported streaming and linear or only ad supported streaming, and then start to make some adjustments for how much of that is premium in premium environments, and what's the impression availability within those environments, you still see that ad-supported streaming has a long way to go to be able to match the scale that linear TV can provide today. So the timing is absolutely right. We have this moment, this opportunity to be able to invest in the bones, if you will, of ad-supported streaming, the environments that, especially in a weakened economy, that seemed to, on surface, to be able to gain so much because they are lower cost than some of the more premium services. So now is the time to go in and really fortify those foundations to make them the better buying environments. I want to ask a question, David, about the IAB's involvement. What unique capacity do you think the IAB can play in bringing the industry together?
It's an interesting question, one that I've thought about a good bit as well. The IAB comes at this from, I think there are two answers to that. Number one, the IAB constituents represent lots of different parts of the ecosystem. Certainly the sell side, publishers and ad tech. Also brands. There are brands that are very active in the IAB, and agencies sit on lots of our committees and councils and guide us in the things that they are challenged with. So it's really, we call it a big tent organization. There's lots of folks throughout the ecosystem that are inexorably linked to the IAB. So that's, I guess, number one. Number two, some of the challenges that we face are business challenges. An agreement on what measurement looks like. Measurement will never be perfect. Perfection is the enemy of progress. And you have to just agree from a business perspective, this is what we're going to measure, and this is how we're going to value it. There are other things that are technical in nature, that require technical standards. Cross-screen reach and frequency is a challenging, vexing problem that will require some underlying technological standards and frameworks to be put in place. The IAB comes at this with the IAB Tech Lab, which is the IAB is a standard setting body, and the Tech Lab is as well, with deep expertise in technical kind of matters. So it's both the composition of our membership and the involvement across the ecosystem, and some of the problems that we're facing require a technical perspective. As you think about the OTT and the CTV world, those standards, it's still a relatively nascent space. Back to the early days where we talked about standard ad units and 468 by 60s and all that kind of stuff. We need to do some of that same kind of hygiene in the CTV and OTT space, lest we kind of revisit some of the challenges that we faced when the internet space, blossomed, more than a decade ago.
Well, here I'm thinking even of just tackling the issue of fraud and viewability, which, boy, if there's any organization you'd want to be able to head off the possibility of those things really coming in and poisoning the pool, the IAB is in the perfect position to be able to learn from the aggregate of the last 15 to 20 years of building a digital advertising ecosystem and really challenging the television side of this business to not fall into those same traps, and to make sure that as we all build out this better foundation that the IAB envisions, and which I think the whole industry needs, that we get to learn from the mistakes that we all know have plagued digital and that we're making progress on, but certainly could be made better for how TV works, right?
To that point, I mean, I think you raised an absolutely a valid point, and I just want to talk about this. The television initiative that we are doing really has, we're in phase one. We had a kickoff meeting, a leadership meeting, and now we're doing a series of sprint meetings on a variety of different topics, whether it's measurement or terms and conditions, marketplace dynamics, automation. And really the goal of all of these meetings, for starters, is just to do an inventory of what's the current state. What exists in the marketplace today, either initiatives that are ongoing, initiatives that we could learn from, for a couple of reasons. Number one, the ones that have been most successful probably have some characteristics that we can say those are best practices that we need to kind of extract and use those going forward. We've also, as a collective industry, stubbed our toe a couple of times. So there have been things that haven't worked quite as well. So pitfalls, things that we shouldn't be doing any longer. So we're really trying to identify what exists out in the world in each of these areas. We heard from folks around GARM. We heard from folks around CCPA. We heard from OpenAP. What could we learn from them as a best practice so that we don't have to recreate the wheel and start all over again. Phase two, after we go through all these meetings, will be an identification of things that aren't being tackled yet, or tackled in a meaningful way. So what we're calling white space. And what do we do about it as a collective? Should we start an initiative to think about terms and conditions in this new video ecosystem? Maybe, but that's probably a longer term exercise.
Last question from me before we're going to dive into some audience questions. I want to go back to the article and media post that you penned, David, about the acknowledgement of some of the efforts that have gone before, but also some of the industry projects that have happened in adjacent spaces. So you mentioned, for example, OpenAP as an example of a consortium, that'll be my term for this, that gives the IAB hope that, in fact, bringing industry together around this common mission and identification of problems and rallying towards solutions can be effective. On the other hand, having had my own personal experience working in mobile on different cross member, cross brand, cross company consortiums, I saw most of those fail, in part because I think they almost always ran up against a conflict between agreeing on what may be a greater industry good and advocating for something that would have been good for maybe only one or two players in the consortium. I'm curious, just based on your own experience and what you've observed and how other projects like this, perhaps in adjacent industries, have come together, what can you learn from those that gives you hope that with this particular project, with IAB at the helm, it can really come out on the other end with some success?
One of the things that David Levy from OpenAP said when we had our kickoff meeting is that what they've learned is that sometimes it's better to cooperate than it is to compete. And I think that as time goes on and as the business becomes more complicated, more complex, and arguably more difficult, we're going to see that there are some things that are points of difference and some things that are unique selling propositions that need to stay kind of resident with individual players. But there are some things that for the betterment of the collective good, we need to align on. That's kind of point one. Point two, if I have learned nothing in my experience with activities like this, it is that we are in a world that seeks immediate gratification. And it is critically important that whatever it is, whatever initiative that it is that we're starting, we set up a series of low-hanging fruit, quick wins, as well as some more kind of considered or long-term projects. We're all super busy in this world, and now more so than ever. Nobody wants to continue to have meetings without kind of productivity or actually producing something of value. So it's critically important to have some kind of quick, short wins, and then some things that you can look at over time. You need to be very, very clear about what it is you're trying to accomplish. A clear charter, clear objectives, clear governance, and a kind of clear cadence for how folks are going to come together. I think those are the recipes for success that I have seen in the past, and we're going to take that and apply it for our television effort.
We're going to go into some audience questions now. David, thanks for answering mine. If any of you watching have a question for David Cohen, the president of the IAB, and his colleagues' initiative to revisit and reinvent aspects of the way that the video ecosystem operates, especially for the benefit of buyers, please feel free to ask it however you're watching. We have eyes on all those channels, and we'd love to get your question to David. This question comes from Chris. Chris asks, shouldn't the MRC, the Media Rating Council, be the lead on cross-media metrics? They work with Google and broadcast measurement, for example. Chris, thanks for that question. David, that's a good one. They're not surprising. There are other entities that are that have a stake in this. How would you answer Chris's question?
So a shout out to George Ivey. Hey, George, hopefully you're doing well. I completely agree. I mean, we are working in lockstep with the MRC on many initiatives, and this would be one as well. There are things that the MRC does well, and there are kind of adjacent things that we can do in terms of determining business objectives and priorities, and there could be standards that are set and certifications against that standard that the MRC does. So this is not an either or. This is a both. And just to be clear, one of the things that also sometimes vexes the industry in issues like this is it's kind of like this is my turf, not created here. We're going to own this. We are trying to be as open and as transparent as we possibly can be. Because we want input and guidance and leadership and cooperation from all sides of the industry. And George, we are going to be coming your way sooner rather than later. So MRC is definitely in the mix.
Good answer. And Chris, thank you very much for that question. I've got one more here. This one comes from Shahid. Shahid is referencing the part of your recommendations. I think that you've got 7 broad brushstroke recommendations for improving the industry, David, in which you talk about the need to reimagine the upfront on basically a rolling annual basis. Could you say more about what that means, and specifically how would that contrast with the current upfront structure today?
There has been a lot of conversation on marketplace timing, which is interesting. I think it kind of misses the point. If there has been one word that has been omnipresent for me in the past couple of months, it has been agility and flexibility. And those media types, those creative, those marketers that can actually put something in market, read and adjust, are the ones that are winning, if anyone is winning in the current marketplace. Digital, for the longest time, has been all about that. The ability to read, react, respond. Some things are obviously more fluid and easier than others. Search, super easy. Social, super easy. Display and video, not as easy, but not bad. You can optimize very quickly. You can cancel very quickly. One of the things that's been challenging for the linear television business, in a world of supply and demand, you make a commitment to spend money over a long period of time. And while there is some flexibility, I know that there's a desire for more flexibility than what is currently built into the process. And that's a negotiation between the buy side and the sell side. As a digital guy for the most of my career, when I moved into the world of television, it always struck me as rather odd that that the May timeframe was the appropriate time to be kind of planning for fourth quarter to third quarter of the following year. It was outside of business planning procedures. It was a little too early to actually know what one wanted to do for the kind of coming year. So when I was at Magna, there was a woman that I worked with named Danny Benowitz who created this idea called the calendar year upfront. Well, why don't we align the upfront to more of a calendar cadence, which is much better for kind of business planning process. We'll have a much better idea in the fall what we're looking to do for the next year than we did in May or June. So, lots of our business when we were at Magna was done on a calendar year cadence. And I think that there's a whole bunch of the rest of the market that is thinking about that now, because if there was ever a time of uncertainty about budgets and kind of what's going to happen in 2021, it would be now. I think that ultimately it's less about whether it's a broadcast year or a calendar year and more about doing what's right for your business. All businesses are not created equal. Some are on different fiscals. Some want to do stuff on a monthly basis. Others want to do it on a quarterly basis. So I think that we're going to move into this world where it will be more of a kind of hybrid. We had been in a world where there was broadcast year and calendar year. There is a call for that to happen wholesale that just happened in the past couple of days. But I think that what we're finding is that there's probably that could be true for lots of marketers, but it's different strokes for different folks. I think there's lots of people who will do things differently based on their individual business priorities.
Shahid, thanks so much for your question. And Chris, thanks again for yours. We're just about out of time. David, I know you've got to run to another commitment. But before I let you go, how can people who are watching this learn more about the initiative and maybe raise their hand to get involved?
So I'm happy to take an email. It's david@iab.com. If you were interested in any of the things that you heard about today, I can let you know how to get involved. Or you can go to iab.com/tele, TELE-vision reset. And then that could give you all the information about our television initiative. We do have a automation workshop, which is happening next week, June 17th at 3 p.m. If you're interested in attending that, would love to hear from you.
Awesome. David, thank you so much for taking some time out to walk us through this. I wish you the very best of luck on this project. We'll, of course, at Simulmedia be very eager to see how it unfolds and provide support in any way that we can. But we certainly agree on the nature of the problems and wish you and your colleagues the very best in helping rally the industry to get them solved. So thanks so much for joining.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
All right, folks, before we adjourn for today, I just want to tease our shows for next week. We've got two great programs that are coming up next week. We are going to be talking to Brian Balfour. He is the founder and CEO of the Reforge platform. Reforge is a platform that is designed for marketers and product managers to help them plot a framework and path and strategy for growth. He's been a guy I've been reading about for years. I think I first read him back in 2013 or 2014. He and men like Andrew Chen were among the first who were really thinking about growth frameworks. And having taken the Reforge class myself, I can tell you that he's got so much valuable information and insight. And I can't wait to talk to him about what he's seeing in the world of growth, both the opportunities and the headwinds, and what he's advising young people, especially as they start navigating their own careers. So join us for that conversation with Brian Balfour. And then we also have a live stream planned with Gordon Ho. Gordon is the former CMO of Princess Cruise Lines. And he was on the ground in this remarkable moment where the marketing team ran point in helping to get COVID-infected patients off of cruise ships all over the world. And Gordon has remarkable stories to tell about his involvement in really being the front end of the brand. If we think about the value of the brand and where the brand touches the customer, I can't think of one that's more poignant and more important than, in this case, reacting in an emergency to protect the health and safety of your customers. And so Gordon's got some great stories to tell and some learnings that he's going to share with us. So I hope you'll tune in then. We'll get some information out to all of our subscribers before the end of the week about these shows so you can sign up and get them on your calendar. So until then, folks, thanks so much for joining us for today's live stream. Thanks again to David Cohen from the IAB for joining. Look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for joining Simulmedia Live. Bye-bye.